Today I want to give you all a look into some of the lenses that I've been using lately for the Pocket 6K. I've been using this camera since June at this point. I feel like I have a really nice setup of lenses to get me through most situations that I might encounter. The lenses that I am going to mention are all ideal for different situations. Some work better for run and gun shooting, and some work better in a more controlled environment. I will be breaking this video down into categories as such. The first category is the run and gun lens. For run and gun work, I have been using the Canon 24-105 f4 L Is Usm Lens. This is the first version, but there is a second version. I believe the second version's differences are pretty minimal and weren't compelling enough to spend the difference on the newer model. Glass has always been notorious for being extremely sharp. I've always been skeptical of zoom lenses for their typical lack of sharpness in the details, but I don't need to worry too much about with this one's. Another feature that I want to mention is just the sheer range of focal lengths that you can achieve. With a range like 24-105, you can get such a wide variety of shots in such a short period of time. My third biggest reason for using this lens is the image stabilization that is built into it. As we all know, the Pocket 6K does not have image stabilization, so this makes shooting handheld pretty tricky. Micro jitters are pretty much inevitable with such a small camera. That problem is pretty much solved with this lens. Like anything, this lens is not without its cons. Its sheer size and weight make it kind of exhausting to wield at all times. And another con worth mentioning is its f4 aperture. Really not the fastest lens in the world, but f4 is typically reasonable and not too big of an issue. Recently, in situations where I've had more control over the environment, I've been using the Contax Zeiss 28mm f2.8 lens and the Helios 50mm f1.8. The Contax Zeiss is an amazing little vintage lens that is extremely sharp. Its sharpness is complemented beautifully with subtle vintage characteristics like soft, bloomy edges and extremely flattering bokeh. At some point, I will be getting more Contax Zeiss lenses to complete a set for more cinematic work. The 28mm focal length is wide enough to give you a nice perspective on the surroundings, while also being tight enough to throw a background fairly out of focus. The Helios 50-1.8 is a lens that needs really no introduction. A lot of people are really familiar with this lens, and for a good reason. It is a very unique lens that gives an image a ton of interesting character. I particularly like using this lens when there is a person sitting in an interview. It has the coveted swirly ovular bokeh to give your image a dreamlike characteristic. It is so flattering for the skin and is perfect for the amount of soft around the edges and sharp in the middle. The biggest con with using vintage lenses like these is that the focus rings can get really stiff over time. My Contax is fine, but the Helios is definitely not a lens that I could rack focus on while shooting handheld. These lenses are good for their intended use, but could obviously still be used in either situation. I just prefer to use them in these specific scenarios when I have a choice.